Welcome to the 5-Minute Biographies podcast, where every week we tell you interesting things about interesting people in about 5 minutes. And now here is your host, Wayne Armstrong.
Hi guys, welcome to the show. Before we begin, I would just like to give a quick shout out to Tony Moore, who pointed out the almost unforgivable error I made in the last episode, where I said that Clark Gable starred opposite Carole Lombard in Gone with the Wind. The part of Scarlett O'Hara was, of course, played by Vivien Leigh. I've corrected the audio file and it now sounds a bit weird, but at least it's correct. Anyway, let's get on with this week's show, which is episode 7 of season 5 of the 5-Minute Biographies podcast, Oliver Hardy. Norvell Hardy was born on the 18th of January 1892 in Harlem, Georgia, USA. He was the son of a Revolutionary War veteran called Oliver, who had fought and been wounded fighting for the Confederates at the Battle of Antietam. His mother was Emily Norvell, who was descended from Captain Hugh Norvell, who had arrived in Williamsburg, Virginia, sometime before 1635. Norvell's father died when he was less than 12 months old. He was the youngest of 5 children, although tragically his brother Sam had died when they were children as the result of an accident on the Oconee River. Norvell had managed to pull Sam from the water, but he was unable to revive him. Norvell was known to be a somewhat difficult child, and as a result was sent to a military academy in Milledgeville, Georgia, and then when 13 years old he attended junior high at the Young Harris College in North Georgia. He wasn't a huge fan of formal education and ran away from boarding school in order to sing with a theatrical group he had joined. His mother, recognizing that he had a talent for singing and that he had gained an interest in theatre, sent him to Atlanta, where he studied music and singing with Adolph Dam Peterson. Norvell skipped some lessons though in order to make a little money and sang at the Alcazar Theatre for $3.50 per week. It didn't last though, and he ended up back at Milledgeville. As a tribute to his father, Norvell added the name Oliver in front of his own sometime before 1910 and appears in the US Census for 1910 as Oliver N. Hardy. From that point forward, he used the name Oliver on all formal documents and communications. In 1910, a movie theatre opened in Milledgeville, which is where Oliver was now calling home. He worked in the theatre in a number of different roles, including as projectionist and manager, but as he saw more and more movies on the big screen, he started to believe that he could do a better job. Oliver wanted to get into the movie industry, and a friend suggested that Jacksonville, Florida may be a good starting point, as he knew some films were being made there. Oliver Hardy moved to Jacksonville in 1913. At night he sang at the local cabaret and vaudeville theatres. He had a regular job there during the day at the Lubin Manufacturing Company, which is where he met Madeline Soloshin, and they were married on the 17th of November 1913. All the time he was working in Jacksonville, Oliver Hardy stayed on the lookout for work in the film industry, and his patience paid off when in 1914 he acted in his first movie, called Outwitting Dad. However, he found that his large size — he was over 6 feet tall and weighed more than 300 pounds — restricted him to playing certain roles. These were usually along the lines of the hired muscle, or the villain. He did, however, also find that his size lent itself quite nicely to comedy roles. Over the next 12 months, Oliver had appeared in more than 50 single-reel short films for the Lubin Company. Over the next few years, Hardy worked for a number of different studios, including Pathé and Edison in New York, before returning to Jacksonville to work for the Vim Comedy Company. Although Vim closed down after Hardy found that they were stealing from the payroll, the company was bought by the King B studio, leading Oliver to work with Bill Rouge, Billy West and Ethelbert Palmer. He was by this time known as a comedy actor, but occasionally played the part of the heavy well into the 1920s. In 1917, Oliver moved to Los Angeles and worked as a freelance actor for a number of studios in Hollywood. He separated from his wife in 1919, and by November 1921 they were divorced. 7 days after his divorce had been finalised, he married again, this time to Myrtle Reeves, but it is said that she became an alcoholic and their marriage was not a happy one. In 1921, Oliver starred in The Lucky Dog, a movie produced by G.M. Anderson, which also starred an English comedian called Stan Laurel. Although this was the start of a legendary comedy partnership, neither of them knew it, and didn't work together again until Hardy appeared in Yes, Yes, Nanette, which starred Jimmy Finlayson, but was directed by Stan Laurel. It would be 1926, though, before Laurel and Hardy shared screen time again, even though they had no scenes together in a film called 45 Minutes from Hollywood. The following year, though, it would all change, as Laurel and Hardy began to star together as a comedy duo, and churned out a huge number of short comedy films. In 1930 they appeared in their first colour movie, called The Rogue Song, and their first full-length movie, Pardon Us, followed in 1931. They won their only Academy Award in 1932 for The Music Box, another short film, which they continued to turn out until 1935. In 1936, Oliver Hardy's marriage to Myrtle Reeves was over, and they were divorced. Whilst on the set of The Flying Deuces 3 years later, Hardy met and fell in love with Virginia Lucille Jones, who was a script girl. The couple remained happily married up until Oliver's death in 1957. In the early 1940s, Laurel and Hardy began performing for the USO and supported Allied troops throughout the Second World War. After the war in 1947, the pair went on a tour of the United Kingdom. They were initially apprehensive about how they would be received, but they needn't have worried as they were mobbed everywhere they went. Their initial 6-week tour was extended and expanded to include other engagements in Europe, including Scandinavia and France. They continued to visit the UK and France up until 1954. Laurel and Hardy's final film came in 1951. Called Atoll K, it wasn't the easiest film for the pair to work on. They both became ill during filming, and Stan Laurel had to rewrite some of the script to make it fit their style. In 1954 they were featured as a duo on This Is Your Life on television, and their final public appearance together was for a filmed insert for the BBC TV show This Is Music Hall in 1955. They were contracted to appear in more TV shows, but health issues for both men meant that the plan never came to fruition. In May of 1954, Oliver Hardy had a small heart attack, and after this he made efforts to look after his health more. He lost a considerable amount of weight, but on the 14th of September 1956 he suffered a major stroke and was confined to bed, unable to speak. He was cared for at home by Lucille, but in early August of the following year he suffered 2 more strokes and slipped into a coma. On the 7th of August 1957, Oliver Hardy died at the age of 65. He was cremated, and his remains were interred at the Masonic Garden of Valhalla Memorial Park Cemetery in North Hollywood. I hope you enjoyed that episode of 5-Minute Biographies. You can also read these biographies for yourself on the website at www.5minutebiographies.com, where you will find quite a few biographies for your reading pleasure that have not yet been turned into podcasts. Also on the website you'll find links to our social media accounts, so please follow us. If you enjoy the show, and if you are able, you can also help alleviate some of the cost of putting it together by hitting the donate button on the site. And please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, as this would really help the show to grow. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the 5-Minute Biographies podcast at www.5minutebiographies.com.